The reason why the focus on young men came is because most of the news stories that are kind of about young people who kind of fall off the radar involve young men as either victims or perpetrators. So that was kind of where the focus on young men initially came from. As I did the research, I kind of increasingly kind of kept that focus because most kind of statistics and kind of anecdotal evidence shows that males among kind of the millennial and younger generations are especially kind of not finishing school, not working, kind of not becoming less involved in the economy, and consequently also less involved in kind of mainstream conversations. There's like lots of studies that come out virtually every week about young men playing more video games and therefore working less, or young men becoming turning to opioids often in the absence of working. And so I think it's a group that, I mean, a big part of the focus too is that when President Obama was in office, he started something called My Brother's Keeper, which I believe is the first ever kind of federal government initiative in any country in the West to focus on the particular challenges that young males face. And with him leaving office, I thought it would be especially important to explain why those kind of initiatives are important, because I could see them disappearing very quickly. So the idea was not to, and this is a kind of a thing that I try to emphasize in the book very often, is that it's not about kind of like saying another group's needs are not important, or saying that there's like kind of a competition for kind of attention, because a lot of even though, for instance, young men are graduating from post-secondary school less, they are still, when working, being paid more than young women. So there's still important inequalities that don't get captured by my book. But I think there are particular challenges around emotional development, engaging in the economy, finishing school, incarceration, violence, and also tendency to gravitate to extreme groups that are especially challenging for young males, and that's where the focus on young males comes from.
Interesting. I just curious if you saw sort of young women increasingly becoming more attracted to sort of the, because you don't hear about sort of young women generally becoming involved in that, but there's certain cases that do. I just wondered if it was a trend across the board of just youth in general feeling, really disenfranchised and disconnected, and I don't know, just it's fascinating. It's fascinating.
It is, yeah. So if you look at these trends are never like, how to put this? We're never fully isolated from one another, right? So to the extent that these problems affect one group, they're going to affect the other. For instance, I talk about Newark a lot in one chapter, where there's just massive numbers of males being incarcerated. Now, there are higher rates of incarceration for young women in that city as well. Not at the same rate, but certainly that does affect. But what is a greater effect on young women in those situations is young women having to raise children by themselves because so many men are in prison. And so there's never a way where one of these problems doesn't affect everybody else around us. So that's definitely a reality. And the evidence shows that as young men struggle to kind of find their place in mainstream society, that is not isolated to them alone, but it is becoming kind of a uniquely challenging problem for males. And I think in particular because some of the advantages that men have enjoyed historically are being taken away, and a lot of communities I don't think are responding well to that. I think a lot of the evidence shows that like the increasing kind of role of populism in Western politics kind of grows out of that too. So someone like Donald Trump, for instance, or his equivalents in the United Kingdom, a lot of their support comes from men who are just largely unhappy with the changes that are happening around them. And a lot of that change is based on women participating more in the labor force, not staying home as often, there being need to share more domestic responsibilities. So it's all connected.